I walked through my own front door and felt like a stranger. My son Marcus was standing in the living room I had painted myself 15 years ago. The walls I had chosen in that soft cream color because it made the morning light look gentle. He was standing there with his wife Rachel, her parents Mr. and Mrs. Chen, and a man in a gray suit holding a leather folder. They all turned to look at me like I had interrupted a business meeting, which I suppose I had, except this was my house. The house I bought with the life insurance money after my husband died. The house I cleaned offices at night to keep. The house where I raised Marcus alone, where I taught him to ride a bike in that narrow hallway, where I sat up with him through fevers and bad dreams and college applications. Rachel spoke first. Her voice was smooth and calm, the kind of calm that makes you feel crazy for being upset. She said Marcus and I needed to have a serious talk about the house. She said things had changed while I was sick. She said decisions had been made for everyone's protection. The man in the gray suit opened his folder and slid a document across my coffee table. The table I found at a yard sale and refinished with my own hands. He said it was a transfer of deed. He said Marcus had signed as my power of attorney. He said the house now belonged to the Chen family trust, and I had 30 days to make arrangements. Marcus wouldn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the carpet I had saved 6 months to replace after the old one got ruined in a pipe leak. Rachel's mother was already measuring the windows with her eyes. I could see her calculating curtain lengths. I could see her imagining her furniture in my space. And Rachel kept talking in that calm voice about how this was actually better for everyone, how I wouldn't have to worry about upkeep anymore, how they would help me find a nice assisted living situation, how I should be grateful they were handling everything, so I could focus on my recovery. My recovery. I had been in a coma for 7 weeks. A car hit me in a crosswalk on my way home from my shift at the medical supply warehouse where I worked inventory. They said I might not wake up. They said even if I did, I might not be the same. But I woke up 3 days ago. I woke up whole. I woke up myself. And the first thing my son did when I could finally talk again was avoid my calls. Now I understood why. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe now, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. The lawyer, because that's what the man in the gray suit was, handed me a business card and said I had until January 15th to vacate. That was 30 days exactly. He said if I didn't leave voluntarily, they would proceed with formal eviction. He used that word, eviction, like I was a tenant who hadn't paid rent. Rachel's father finally spoke, his English careful and precise. He said they understood this was emotional, but the paperwork was legal and binding. He said Marcus had made a responsible choice during a crisis. He said families had to make hard decisions about assets and care and long-term planning. I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was 32 years old. I had worked double shifts to send him to college. I had gone without, so he could have what he needed. When he wanted to propose to Rachel, I gave him my mother's ring, the only piece of jewelry I owned that meant anything. When they needed help with the down payment on their condo, I took out a loan against this house that was supposed to be my retirement. This house that was supposed to be my security after a lifetime of being careful and afraid and responsible. He finally met my eyes. He said he thought I was going to die. He said the doctors told him to prepare for the worst. He said Rachel's parents offered to help, and it seemed like the right thing to do. He said the house would have gone into probate anyway, and this way it stayed in the family. I asked him what family he meant, mine or theirs. He flinched. Rachel put her hand on his arm, a gesture of ownership I recognized from 100 small moments I had tried to ignore over the past 3 years. The thing nobody tells you about betrayal is how polite it can be, how it can happen in a clean living room with paperwork and reasonable voices and phrases like, for the best, and think it through, and don't make this harder than it has to be. The thing nobody tells you is that the people who hurt you the most can look you in the eye and truly believe they've done nothing wrong. After they left, all of them filing out through my front door like they had somewhere important to be, I sat on my couch and looked around at my life. Every corner of this house held a memory. The kitchen where I taught Marcus to make my mother's cornbread recipe. The bathroom where I painted over ugly tile because I couldn't afford to replace it. The bedroom where I cried myself to sleep after my husband's funeral, and then got up the next morning because Marcus needed breakfast and the bills wouldn't stop coming. There was a lemon tree in my back patio, just a small one in a big ceramic pot. I had planted it from a seed 7 years ago, the year Marcus graduated from college. It had never produced fruit, but I kept watering it anyway. I kept believing that if I was patient enough, if I took care of it right, someday it would give me something sweet. That's what I thought about my life too. That if I worked hard enough and sacrificed enough and loved enough, someday I would get to rest. Someday I would get to sit in my own house and feel safe. But that night, sitting alone in a house that apparently wasn't mine anymore, I realized I had been holding on to a secret I hadn't even known was there. A secret about what I was worth, about what I would accept, about how much I would let someone take from me before I finally said no. The rain started around midnight. I could hear it on the roof, that steady drum that used to comfort me. Now it sounded like a clock ticking. 30 days, 720 hours, 43,200 minutes to pack up a life and disappear so my son's in-laws could move into the space I had built. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Marcus. It said we should talk tomorrow when I was calmer. It said he knew this was hard, but I had to trust him. It said he loved me. I stared at those 3 words until they stopped looking like words at all. Just shapes, just sounds that used to mean something. I had a neighbor, Ms. Eleanor, who lived 2 houses down. She was 81 years old and sharp as new scissors. She had been the one who called the ambulance the day I got hit. She had visited me in the hospital every single day I was in the coma, even though the nurses said I probably couldn't hear anything. She told me later that she read to me mystery novels, because she said if anything could make a person want to wake up, it was needing to know who did it. The next morning, I walked down to her house. She opened the door already knowing something was wrong. She had that look old women get, that look that says they've seen enough of life to recognize trouble before it even opens its mouth. I told her everything. The whole story spilled out in her kitchen that smelled like coffee and vanilla and old wood and safety. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I didn't expect. She said when her husband died 30 years ago, his family tried to take their house too. Said it should go to his brother since she was just a wife, not a blood relative. Said she couldn't manage property alone. This was back when women still had to fight for every single thing, even more than now. She said she almost let them do it, almost signed the papers, almost accepted that she didn't deserve to fight. But then she found a box in the attic, a box her husband had left with papers inside. A will he had written and signed and filed properly, leaving everything to her. His family had pretended it didn't exist, had tried to make her feel small and confused and grateful for their help. She said she took that box to a lawyer who didn't charge her anything because he had been her husband's friend from the Navy. She said the look on that family's face when the judge ruled in her favor was something she could still picture clear as yesterday. Ms. Eleanor asked me if Marcus had really been my power of attorney, asked if I had actually signed those papers. I told her I had signed a medical power of attorney before a surgery 2 years ago, just a standard document my doctor recommended everyone have. But I never signed anything about the house, never gave anyone permission to sell or transfer or touch my property. Never even thought I would need to protect myself from my own son. She made me another cup of coffee. She said I needed to think very carefully about what I had in writing. Bank statements, mortgage papers, the original deed, any emails or texts from Marcus, anything that proved this house was mine and that I had never agreed to give it up. She said I needed a lawyer, a real one, not someone Marcus and Rachel had chosen. She said her church had a legal aid program that helped people who couldn't afford big fees. She said there was a woman there, Catherine Morales, who handled estate and property cases. I felt something shift in my chest. Not hope exactly, more like the beginning of a spine growing back. I had spent so many years being soft, being the one who bent, being the one who said yes, even when I wanted to scream no. I had raised Marcus to be better than that, stronger than that, and somehow I had raised him to be someone who could look at his own mother and see an obstacle instead of a person. Ms. Eleanor gave me Catherine Morales's number. She said to call right now, this minute, before I had time to talk myself out of it. She said the clock was already ticking, and 30 days was enough time to fight if I started immediately. She said something else too. She said even if I lost the house, I needed to fight, not for the building, for my soul, because if I let them do this without standing up, I would spend the rest of my life being someone who got erased. I called from her kitchen. Catherine Morales answered on the third ring. Her voice was brisk and businesslike, but not cold. I told her my situation in sentences that kept breaking apart. She asked specific questions. Had I been declared incompetent? No. Had a judge approved the power of attorney for financial decisions? I didn't think so. Had I been given copies of the transfer paperwork? No. Did I have access to my bank accounts? I didn't know. I hadn't checked. She told me to come to her office that afternoon. She said to bring any documents I had. She said not to sign anything else, not to agree to anything verbally, and not to leave the house if I could help it. She said possession was important in property disputes. She said if I left voluntarily, it would be harder to claim I was forced out. She said the 30-day notice might not even be legal, depending on how the transfer was executed. She said we had work to do, but it was work we could do. When I got home, I went through my filing cabinet, the one in my bedroom closet where I kept everything important. Birth certificates, my marriage license, my husband's death certificate, Marcus's report cards from elementary school, the deed to my house, dated October 2010, my name alone on the title, mortgage statements showing I had paid off the loan in 2023, 2 years early, because I picked up extra shifts and didn't take a vacation for 4 years straight. I found the medical power of attorney I had signed. It was very specific. It gave Marcus the right to make healthcare decisions if I was incapacitated. It said nothing about property, nothing about selling or transferring or touching any of my assets. It was a 2-page document that covered things like life support and treatment options and organ donation. That was all. I took pictures of everything with my phone. I made copies on the little printer I used for coupons. I put the originals in an envelope and the copies in a folder. I was moving like someone who knew what she was doing, even though inside I felt like I was drowning. My phone rang. Marcus again. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message saying Rachel's parents wanted to start packing up the house this weekend to make the transition easier. He said they would pay for a moving company. He said they had found a nice senior living community near their condo where I could have my own apartment and wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or being alone. He said the deposit was already paid. He said I should see it as a blessing, a fresh start, a chance to simplify. I played the message 3 times, listening to the spaces between his words, trying to find my son in there somewhere, the boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street, the teenager who cried on my shoulder when his girlfriend broke up with him, the college kid who called me every Sunday just to tell me about his week. Where did that person go? When did he become someone who could do this and call it a blessing? I went to Catherine Morales' office at 3 o'clock. It was in a regular office building near downtown, nothing fancy, the kind of place where people helped other people because it needed doing, not because it was glamorous. She was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with thick black hair pulled back and eyes that looked at you like they were reading a book. She had me sit down and tell her everything from the beginning. She took notes. She asked questions I didn't always know the answers to. She looked at my documents and made copies. She was quiet for a while after I finished talking. Then she said, this was bad, but it wasn't impossible. She said Marcus had likely overstepped his authority. She said a medical power of attorney doesn't give someone the right to transfer property without explicit financial power of attorney or a court order. She said the transfer might be voidable if we could prove I never consented and was mentally competent when I woke up. But then came the hard part. She said we would need to file an emergency motion to halt the transfer and eviction. She said we would need medical records proving I was alert and oriented. She said we would need to show the court that this was done while I was incapacitated and without my knowledge or consent. She said it would cost money. Not a fortune, but money I might not have. Filing fees, court costs, her time. I told her I had savings, about $12,000 in a money market account. It was supposed to be for emergencies and retirement. I guess this qualified. She said that would be enough to start. She said if we won, we might be able to recover costs. If we lost, I would be out that money and the house both. I asked her what she thought my chances were. She didn't lie to me. She said it depended on what Marcus and his lawyer had done exactly. If they had been sloppy, we had a good chance. If they had been careful and thorough, it would be harder. She said the fact that I woke up and was clearly competent was huge in our favor. She said the fact that I never consented in writing to a financial power of attorney was huge. But she said family court was unpredictable. Judges were human. Some of them believed adult children always had their parents' best interests at heart. Some of them had seen enough abuse to be skeptical. She asked me something then that made me stop breathing for a second. She asked me if I was prepared to lose my relationship with Marcus over this, because that's what would probably happen. Even if I won the house back, he would see it as betrayal. His wife definitely would. Her family would make me the villain in their story. I would be the ungrateful mother who took them to court, the crazy old woman who couldn't accept help, the bitter person who destroyed a family over pride. I thought about that, really thought about it, because I loved my son. I had loved him every day of his life. I had loved him through tantrums and failures and disappointments, and watching him grow into someone I didn't always understand, but always loved. Losing him would break something in me that couldn't be fixed. But then I thought about what keeping him would cost. Accepting this, living in an apartment someone else chose, paid for with what was essentially my own money because they were taking my house, smiling at family dinners while his wife's parents lived in my home, pretending everything was fine, shrinking myself down small enough to fit into the space they had decided I should occupy, spending whatever years I had left being grateful for crumbs from a table that used to be mine. I told Catherine to file the motion. That night, Marcus came to the house. He let himself in with a key that was apparently still his to use. He found me in the kitchen making soup, my mother's chicken and rice recipe that I made when I needed to feel like things could be normal. He stood in the doorway and said we needed to talk about being reasonable. He said he had heard I went to see a lawyer. Rachel's father had connections at the courthouse. They knew I was filing something. I kept stirring my soup. I asked him if he thought it was reasonable to take someone's house while they were in a coma. He said that wasn't what happened. He said he was protecting my assets. I asked him how transferring my house to his in-laws protected me. He said I didn't understand the full situation. He said there were debts I didn't know about, medical bills from the hospital, costs that were going to pile up. He said Rachel's parents had offered to help, to take over the house expenses and make sure everything was handled properly. I asked him to show me these debts, these bills. He got frustrated, said I was being difficult, said he had tried to handle this quietly, and now I was making it ugly, said lawyers were expensive and unnecessary, said we could work this out as a family if I would just calm down and listen. There was that word again, calm, like my anger was the problem. Like my refusal to disappear was what made this difficult. Rachel came in then. She had been waiting in the car, I guess, and got tired of waiting. She said she wanted to be honest with me. She said they needed more space. She said they were planning to start a family, and the condo wasn't big enough. She said this house was perfect for raising kids, a real yard, good schools nearby. She said her parents had offered to buy it from Marcus, so Rachel and Marcus could eventually buy it from them. A family arrangement that made sense for everyone. Everyone except me, apparently. She said I should be happy about that. Happy my house would be where my grandchildren grew up. She said most women my age would be thrilled to help their kids this way. She said I was being selfish. That word landed like a slap. Selfish. Me. The woman who had given up everything for my son, who had worked until my hands ached and my feet went numb, who had eaten cereal for dinner so he could have meat, who had worn the same winter coat for 12 years so he could have new clothes for school. I turned off the stove. I asked them both to leave. Marcus said we weren't done talking. I said yes, we were. I said the next conversation would be in court. Rachel laughed, actually laughed. She said I couldn't afford to fight them. She said her father knew judges and lawyers all over the city. She said I would lose and end up with nothing and no family, and it would be my own fault for being stubborn. I walked to the front door and opened it. I said, "Get out of my house." Marcus looked like I had hit him. He said I was acting crazy. Said the coma must have affected me more than the doctors thought. Said maybe I did need to be in assisted care if this was how I was going to behave. Rachel put her hand on his arm again. That same possessive gesture. She said they would give me space to think. Said I had until Monday to come to my senses. Said after that, things would get very unpleasant. They left. I locked the door behind them. All 3 locks, the deadbolt and the chain and the little latch at the bottom that I never used. Then I went back to the kitchen and finished making my soup. I ate it at the table by myself. It tasted like every meal I had ever made in this house. Like history. Like resistance. Like the quiet rebellion of staying alive. The emergency motion was filed Friday morning. Catherine called me at noon to say the judge had scheduled a hearing for the following Wednesday. That was fast, she said. It meant the judge saw enough concern to want both sides in front of her quickly. It meant we had a chance, but it also meant we had 5 days to prepare, and the other side had 5 days to prepare their defense. Catherine needed things from me. Medical records from the hospital proving I was comatose during the time of the transfer. Records proving I was now competent. The exact date the deed was transferred. Any communication between me and Marcus about the house before the accident. Any witnesses who could testify about my intentions. Any proof that I never consented to the financial power of attorney. I spent the weekend building a case. Ms. Eleanor came over and helped me organize everything into folders. She made a timeline on poster board like a school project, showing exactly when things happened. The accident, the coma, the transfer date, the day I woke up, the day I found out. She said judges liked visual aids. Said it helped them see the truth faster. My phone kept ringing. Marcus, Rachel, Rachel's mother. Numbers I didn't recognize that were probably their lawyer. I didn't answer any of them. Catherine had told me not to. Said anything I said could be used to paint me as confused or hostile or incompetent. Said silence was my best weapon right now. But on Sunday night, I got a call from Marcus's number, and this time, a woman's voice was on the other end. Not Rachel. An older voice. Formal. She identified herself as Diane Chen, Rachel's mother. She said she wanted to speak to me, woman to woman, mother to mother. She said she understood I was upset. She said she would be too if she were in my position. Then, she made me an offer. She said if I dropped the legal action, they would let me stay in the house, not as the owner, as a tenant. They would charge me minimal rent, just enough to cover property taxes and insurance. I could live there for as long as I wanted. She said this way everyone won. They got the property secured for their daughter's future. I got to stay in my home. Marcus didn't have to see his mother in court. It was smart. I'll give her that. It was exactly the kind of offer designed to make me look unreasonable if I said no. She was giving me what I said I wanted, wasn't she? A place to live. The same roof. The same walls. What did it matter whose name was on the deed? Except it mattered. It mattered because a tenant can be evicted. A tenant has no equity. A tenant is there by permission, not by right. A tenant builds nothing, owns nothing, leaves nothing behind. I would be living in my own house as a guest. And the moment I became inconvenient, the moment I got sick again, or said the wrong thing, or failed to be sufficiently grateful, I would be gone. I told Diane Chen no. She was quiet for a long time. Then her voice changed, got harder. She said I was making a mistake. She said they had been generous, and I was throwing it away. She said when this went to court, she would make sure the judge knew exactly what kind of person I was. Vindictive, grasping, using my age and sympathy to manipulate the system. She said they had proof I had been financially irresponsible, proof I had mental health issues, proof I wasn't capable of managing my own affairs. I asked her what proof. She said I would find out in court. Then she hung up. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about what she said. What proof could they possibly have? I paid my bills on time. I had savings. I had never been diagnosed with anything except high blood pressure and the normal wear of getting older. I had never been to a psychiatrist, never had a guardian, never given anyone any reason to think I couldn't handle my own life, unless they made something up, unless they twisted things, unless they took the fact that I had cried at my husband's funeral, or had been stressed about money, or had gone to my doctor for sleeping pills once after Marcus's wedding and turned it into a story about instability. Catherine had warned me about this, said the other side would try to paint me as either incompetent or malicious. Either I was too confused to understand what was best for me, or I was so spiteful I was hurting my own son out of pride. Monday morning, I got a call from the hospital social worker who had helped me after I woke up. She said someone had requested my psychiatric evaluation records. She said there weren't any. I had never been evaluated psychiatrically, but she said the request itself would be in my file now, and the other side could potentially use that to imply I had needed evaluation, whether I got one or not. Catherine said this was normal dirty pool, said we would deal with it, said I needed to stay focused and not let them rattle me. But I was rattled, because I had thought this was about property law and paperwork. I hadn't understood they would come for my sanity, my fitness, my right to be believed. Tuesday, the day before the hearing, something shifted. Marcus called from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, his voice was different, smaller. He said he needed to talk to me without Rachel knowing. He said, could we meet somewhere? I said no. I said anything he wanted to say. He could say in court. He said please. He said this wasn't what he thought it would be. He said things had gotten out of control. I almost hung up. Almost. But something in his voice reached the part of me that was still his mother. Still the person who had held him when he was scared. I told him he could come to Ms. Eleanor's house. Neutral ground. 1 hour. If he brought anyone else, I was leaving. He showed up alone. He looked terrible. Like he hadn't been sleeping either. He sat across from me in Ms. Eleanor's living room while she made herself busy in the kitchen, not hiding the fact that she was listening to every word. He said he didn't know how to start, so I started for him. I asked him when he decided his wife's family was more important than his own mother. He flinched. He said it wasn't like that. He said when I was in the coma, they told him I had a 10% chance of waking up. 10%. They told him to consider organ donation. They told him to think about what I would want. And Rachel had been there every day. Her parents had been there. They had helped him handle everything. The medical decisions, the bills, the fear. He said Rachel's father suggested the house transfer, said it would protect the asset from medical debt, said if I died, the house would have to go through probate and the hospital could put a lien on it for my bills. Said this way, if I survived, the house would be safe and generating rental income that could help with my care. Said it was temporary, just paperwork to protect everyone. I asked him why he didn't undo it when I woke up. He looked at the floor. He said Rachel thought we should wait, make sure I was really stable, make sure I didn't need long-term care. And then her parents started talking about how this house was actually perfect for Rachel and Marcus, how they could buy it eventually, how it would be an investment, how I would be taken care of either way, and wouldn't it be nice to keep the house in the family. He said by the time he realized what was happening, he was in too deep. He had already signed the papers. Rachel's parents had already paid off my remaining medical bills, and now he owed them. Rachel was talking about babies and needing space, and this being the answer to everything. Her mother was already planning renovations. He said he tried to bring up maybe undoing it, maybe finding another way, but Rachel said he was being weak, said his mother was fine, said I was being dramatic, said they had done nothing wrong and I should be grateful. I asked him if he believed that. Silence. Then he said he didn't know what he believed anymore. He said he loved Rachel. He said he wanted to make her happy. He said her parents had been so good to him, helping with his career, introducing him to people, treating him like a son. He said he felt like he owed them, like he owed everyone, except maybe himself, and definitely not me, apparently. I asked him what he wanted from this conversation. He said he wanted me to know he was sorry. He said he wanted me to know he never meant for it to go this far, but he said he didn't know how to fix it now. He said if he went against Rachel and her family now, his marriage would be over. He said Rachel would never forgive him for choosing me over her. He said he felt trapped. I told him I felt trapped too. Trapped by loving someone who had decided I was disposable. I told him I was going to court tomorrow and I was going to fight. And if that meant losing him, then I had already lost him anyway, because the son I raised would never have done this in the first place. He started to cry. Actual tears. He said he didn't want to lose me. I said then you should have thought of that before you gave away my home. He left. I sat in Ms. Eleanor's living room for a long time after. She came in and sat next to me. She didn't say anything, just sat there being solid and real and on my side. Finally, she said sometimes the hardest part of being a parent is accepting that you can't save your children from themselves. She said Marcus had made his choice. Now I had to make mine. Wednesday morning arrived cold and bright. Catherine picked me up at 8:30. The hearing was at 10. We went over everything one more time in her car. She said the judge was a woman named Sandra Palmer, been on the bench for 15 years, known for being thorough and not suffering fools. She said that was good for us. She said Judge Palmer had seen enough real abuse cases that she could spot fake concern from a mile away. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Not like TV. Just a regular room with wood paneling and fluorescent lights and a feeling of tired bureaucracy. Marcus was there with his lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who looked like he charged by the minute. Rachel and her parents were in the back row. Rachel's mother was wearing pearls. I was wearing my church dress and the anger I had been feeding carefully for days. Judge Palmer came in and everyone stood up. She was maybe 60, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She said she had read both sides' filings. She said this looked fairly straightforward to her, but she wanted to hear it directly. She said Mr. Reeves, Marcus's lawyer, could go first. Mr. Reeves stood up and painted a picture of a responsible son faced with an impossible situation. He said Marcus's mother had been in a coma with minimal chance of recovery. He said the hospital bills were mounting. He said Marcus had legal power of attorney, which was true for medical decisions, but he made it sound broader. He said Marcus consulted with financial advisors, meaning Rachel's father, and made the difficult decision to transfer the property to protect it from medical liens and ensure his mother would have resources for long-term care if needed. He said when I woke up, everyone was relieved and grateful. He said Marcus had tried to explain the situation, but I had become hostile and irrational. He said rather than work with my family, I had hired a lawyer and filed this emergency motion. He said I was now trying to undo a legal transfer that had been done properly and with good intentions. He said I was suffering from post-coma confusion and possibly depression. He said what I needed was family support, not litigation. It was a good story. It was almost believable. If you didn't know the truth, you might even feel sorry for Marcus, the devoted son trying to help his difficult mother. Then Catherine stood up. She didn't waste time on emotion. She went straight for the facts. She said Marcus had medical power of attorney only. She submitted the document proving it. She said there was no court order granting him financial power of attorney. She said the property transfer had occurred while I was incapacitated and without any prior written consent from me authorizing such a transfer. She said the moment I regained consciousness and competency, which medical records proved happened 3 days after waking, the power of attorney became void for any new decisions. She said the transfer wasn't to Marcus, it was to the Chen family trust. She said this wasn't about protecting my assets. It was about transferring my assets to my son's in-laws. She said if this had truly been about protection, Marcus would have transferred the house to himself or created a trust in my name, not signed it over to another family entirely. Judge Palmer asked Mr. Reeves to explain that. He said the Chens had offered to help manage the property during the crisis. He said it was a temporary arrangement. Judge Palmer asked to see the paperwork showing it was temporary. Mr. Reeves hesitated. He said the arrangement was informal but good faith. Judge Palmer said informal property transfers are not generally valid and good faith is not a legal standard she could rule on. Catherine then submitted the 30-day eviction notice. She said this proved the transfer was not about my care or protection. It was about removing me from my own home. She said the medical bills Marcus claimed to be protecting me from had been paid, but not by him, by the Chens, and now they owned my house. She said that wasn't protection. That was a transaction, a purchase masked as family assistance. Judge Palmer asked me to testify. I had been dreading this. I had never spoken in a courtroom before, but I stood up and walked to the witness chair and put my hand on a Bible and swore to tell the truth, which was the only thing I had. Catherine asked me simple questions. Did I ever give Marcus permission to transfer my house? No. Did I know the Chens were paying my medical bills? No. Did I ask anyone to help me sell my house or give it away? No. Did I have any intention of leaving my home? No. She asked me about my mental state. She asked if I knew where I was, what year it was, who the president was. Basic questions designed to prove I wasn't confused or incompetent. I answered all of them clearly. Then Mr. Reeves cross-examined me. He asked if I appreciated everything my son had done for me. I said I appreciated the son who visited me in the hospital. I did not appreciate the son who gave away my house. He asked if I was angry at my son. I said yes. He said, could that anger be affecting my judgment? I said my judgment was fine. My anger was appropriate. He asked if I had ever struggled financially. I said of course I had. I was a widow, raising a child on one income. But I had managed. I had paid my bills. I had bought this house. I had built a life. He asked if Marcus had ever helped me with money. I said yes, and I was grateful. But help is not the same as ownership. He asked if I understood that my son had been trying to protect me. I said what I understood was that my son had taken my house and given it to someone else while I was unconscious and unable to say no. Judge Palmer stopped him there. She said she had heard enough. She said she was going to take a 15-minute recess and review the documents again, and then she would rule. Those 15 minutes felt like hours. Catherine squeezed my hand once, quick, then let go. Professional. But that small gesture told me she thought we had a chance. When Judge Palmer came back, her face was set. She said she had reviewed everything carefully. She said the medical power of attorney was clear and limited. She said there was no financial power of attorney on record. She said the property transfer appeared to have been executed while I was incapacitated, and there was no evidence I had consented to it before or after regaining consciousness. She said the fact that the property went to a third party rather than to Marcus himself was particularly troubling. She said she was voiding the transfer. She said the deed would be returned to my name. She said the eviction notice was invalid. She said I was to be restored to full possession of my property immediately. She said if the Chens had paid my medical bills, they could pursue Marcus for reimbursement in civil court, but they had no claim on my house. She said this was not a complicated case. It was an improper transfer of property from an incapacitated person, and the law was clear about how such transfers are treated. Mr. Reeves stood up and tried to argue. Judge Palmer cut him off. She said her ruling was final. She said if he wanted to appeal, he could file the paperwork, but in the meantime, my home was mine. She said she was also going to note in the record that this case troubled her. She said adult children have a duty to protect their parents, not exploit them. She said she hoped this was poor judgment rather than something more sinister, but either way, it stopped now. The courtroom was very quiet. Rachel's mother stood up and walked out. Her husband followed. Rachel stayed long enough to give Marcus a look that could have cut glass. Then she left too. Marcus just sat there. He looked like he might throw up. His lawyer packed up his briefcase and left without another word. I guess he had already been paid. Catherine and I walked out together. Ms. Eleanor was waiting in the hallway. She had been there the whole time, not allowed in during the hearing, but waiting. She hugged me hard. She said she knew we would win. She said the truth always comes out eventually. You just have to be brave enough to hold on until it does. I felt strange. Not happy exactly. Not relieved. Something heavier. Like I had won a battle but lost something else. Catherine said she would file the paperwork to have the deed corrected. She said it might take a few weeks to process, but in the meantime, the court order meant I was legally back in possession. She said if anyone tried to enter my house or threaten me, I should call the police and show them the order. I asked her how much I owed her. She said we would settle up once everything was finalized, but her best guess was around $4,000 for everything. I had spent $4,000 to keep what was already mine, but I didn't regret it. Not for a second. Marcus followed me out to the parking lot. Catherine started to step between us, but I said it was okay. He stood a few feet away, not coming closer, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. He said he didn't know what to say. I said there probably wasn't anything to say. He said Rachel had already told him not to come home tonight, said her parents were furious, said this was going to destroy his marriage. I wanted to feel sorry for him. Part of me did, but a bigger part of me was done carrying his choices. I said if his marriage couldn't survive him standing up for his mother, then maybe it wasn't a marriage worth having. He said I didn't understand. Rachel's family had invested so much in him, helped him get his job, helped with connections. They would ruin him professionally if he went against them. He said he didn't have a choice. I said everyone has a choice. He chose Rachel over me. He chose comfort over courage. He chose to be a son-in-law instead of a son. Those were his choices. Now he had to live with them, just like I had to live with mine. I got in the car with Catherine. As we pulled away, I saw Marcus standing in that parking lot alone, his phone already ringing, probably Rachel calling to tell him what a disappointment he was. Ms. Eleanor stayed with me that first night back in the house that was legally mine again. She said she didn't want me to be alone, not after everything. We made dinner together, just simple pasta and salad, and we talked about things that had nothing to do with courts or betrayal. She told me about her grandchildren, about her garden that never grew quite right, about how she was thinking of finally taking that trip to Italy she'd been putting off for 30 years. The next few weeks were quiet, almost too quiet. I kept expecting Marcus to call, to show up, to try one more time to explain or apologize or fix things, but he didn't. I heard through a neighbor who knew someone who knew Rachel's family that Marcus and Rachel were in counseling, that Rachel was sleeping at her parents' house, that there was talk of divorce, but nothing filed yet. I heard that Rachel's father was looking into whether they could sue me for the medical bills they had paid. Catherine said, let them try. Said no court would award them anything since they had paid voluntarily and used those payments to try to manipulate a property transfer. I went back to work at the warehouse. My boss had been holding my position, told me to take all the time I needed, but I wanted to work, wanted the routine, wanted to remember that I was someone who did things, who earned things, who built a life through labor and discipline and showing up. My coworkers threw me a little welcome back party, cake from the grocery store bakery, and cards they had all signed. One of them said she had been following my story, heard about it from Ms. Eleanor at church. She said I was brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt tired, but I also felt like myself, like I had reclaimed something more important than property. I had reclaimed my right to say no, my right to fight, my right to take up space in my own life. The deed paperwork came through in March. Catherine called to tell me it was official. The house was in my name again, clean and clear. She said I should put the paperwork somewhere safe. She said I should also think about updating my will and power of attorney with very specific language about who could and couldn't touch my property. She said I should consider naming someone other than Marcus, just in case. I told her I would think about it. Spring came. The lemon tree in my patio finally bloomed. Just 2 flowers, but they were there, small and white and fragrant. I stood looking at them for a long time, thinking about seeds and patience and the things that grow even when you think they never will. Marcus came to the house in April. He called first, asked if he could visit. I said yes. I don't know why. Maybe because I was his mother, and that meant something even when everything else was broken. Maybe because I wanted to see if there was anything left worth saving. He had lost weight. He looked older. He sat at my kitchen table and told me everything had fallen apart. Rachel had filed for divorce. Her parents had cut him off professionally. He had lost 2 major clients because of connections Rachel's father had withdrawn. He said he might have to file bankruptcy. He said he was living in a studio apartment downtown and working twice as hard for half the money. He said he knew I didn't owe him anything. He knew I had every right to never speak to him again. But he said he was sorry. Really, truly sorry. He said he had been weak and stupid, and he had let fear and ambition and the desire to keep everyone happy turn him into someone he didn't recognize. He said losing Rachel hurt, but losing me hurt worse, because Rachel was a wife. I was his mother. I was the person who taught him right from wrong, and he had thrown that away for a house and a marriage and approval from people who never really cared about him at all. I didn't forgive him. Not that day. Maybe not ever, not completely. But I poured him a cup of coffee. I let him sit at my table. I told him I loved him. I told him I probably always would. But I also told him love didn't mean forgetting. Love didn't mean pretending it never happened. Love meant living with the truth and deciding what you could accept. He asked if he could visit again sometime. I said maybe. I said he needed to understand that our relationship was different now. I wasn't going to be the mother who sacrificed everything anymore. I wasn't going to be the soft place that let him fall without consequences. I was going to be a person with boundaries and dignity, and the right to protect myself. If he could accept that, then yes, we could try to build something new. If he couldn't, then this was as close as we would ever get. He nodded. He said he understood. He said he would do whatever it took. I said we would see. Time would tell. Choices would tell. I wasn't going to make it easy. He had broken trust, and trust had to be earned back the hard way. After he left, I sat in my kitchen alone. My kitchen, my house, my life that I had fought for and won. I thought about all the years I had spent being small and accommodating and grateful for whatever scraps of respect people offered me. I thought about how close I had come to losing everything. Not just the house, myself, but I hadn't lost it. I had stood up. I had fought. I had said no when it would have been easier to say yes, and in doing that, I had taught myself something more valuable than property ownership. I had taught myself that I was worth fighting for. The lemon tree bloomed again that summer. This time, 3 flowers, and by fall, I had 1 actual lemon, small and slightly misshapen, and the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I picked it carefully. I cut it open. I squeezed it into tea. It was sour and sweet at the same time. Ms. Eleanor came over and we sat in the patio, drinking lemon tea and talking about everything and nothing. She said I should be proud. I said I was tired. She said tired was okay. Tired meant I had fought. Tired meant I had survived. She said her mother used to tell her that a woman's strength isn't measured by what she endures, but by what she refuses to endure anymore. I thought about that a lot in the months that followed. About refusal, about the power of no, about how we teach people to treat us by what we accept. I had accepted too much for too long. I had taught Marcus that I would always bend, always sacrifice, always put him first, and he had learned that lesson well, too well. Now I was teaching him something different. I was teaching him that I mattered, that my home mattered, that my dignity mattered. I didn't know if he would ever really understand. I didn't know if we would ever have the relationship we used to have. But I knew I would rather live in truth than in the comfortable lie of pretending everything was fine. The house felt different after everything. Same walls, same furniture, same creaky floorboard in the hallway. But it felt more mine than it ever had before. Because now I knew what it cost to keep it. I knew what I was willing to fight for. I knew my own strength. I updated my will. I left specific instructions. The house would go to a women's shelter when I died. A place for women rebuilding their lives after leaving bad situations. A place where women learned to say no. I left a small fund for maintenance and repairs. I left instructions that no one in my immediate family could contest it or benefit from it. Catherine helped me write it airtight. She said it was one of the most satisfying documents she had ever drafted. I told Marcus about it one afternoon when he came by for one of our careful, bounded visits that happened maybe once a month. He didn't argue. He didn't say it wasn't fair. He just nodded. He said he understood. He said he thought it was right. I think that was the moment I started to believe he might actually be growing up. Not growing back into the son I remembered, but growing into someone new. Someone who had learned something hard about himself and was trying to do better. He asked me once if I would ever be able to fully trust him again. I told him the truth. I said I didn't know. I said trust wasn't something you just decided to give or not give. It was something that got built slowly, brick by brick, through consistent action over time. I said he had torn down a building that took 32 years to construct. It was going to take more than apologies and coffee visits to rebuild it. But I also told him I was willing to try, not for his sake, for mine, because holding on to bitterness was exhausting, and I had already spent too much of my life being tired. I told him we would take it slow. We would see what was possible, but I would never again put his needs above my own survival. That part of my life was over. The neighborhood changed a little over the next year. Young families moved in. The house next to Ms. Eleanor's sold to a couple with twins. They reminded me of myself and my husband when Marcus was little, hopeful and overwhelmed and trying to figure everything out. The woman, her name was Jennifer, asked me once if I had any advice for new parents. I thought about it for a long time. Then I told her to love her children fiercely, but never so much that she disappeared in the process. I told her to teach them that love has boundaries, and that those boundaries are what keep love healthy. She looked at me like she didn't quite understand, but she would. Someday, she would. I started volunteering at the women's shelter where my house would eventually go. Just a few hours a week, helping in the kitchen, listening to stories, being present for women who were rebuilding from nothing. Some of them reminded me of myself, not because our situations were the same, but because I recognized that look, the look of someone who had finally decided they were worth fighting for, the look of someone taking their first shaky steps into a life where they made the rules. One woman, Sarah, was about 40, leaving a marriage that had slowly eroded her into almost nothing. She had 2 kids and $40 in cash and a restraining order and terror in her eyes. She asked me how long it took to stop being afraid. I told her the truth. I said the fear probably never completely goes away, but it gets smaller, and you get bigger, you get stronger. You start to remember who you were before you learn to make yourself small. She cried. Then she helped me chop vegetables for dinner. We worked in silence mostly, but it was a good silence, a silence that held understanding. Ms. Eleanor threw me a birthday party in June. I turned 68. She invited half the neighborhood. People brought casseroles and cakes and cheap wine and laughter. Marcus came. It was the first time I had seen him at a social gathering since everything happened. People knew the story, at least versions of it. 5 Points was a small neighborhood in a big city. Word traveled. Some people were kind to Marcus. Some people were cold. He took it all with grace I didn't know he had in him. He gave me a gift. It was a framed photo of me and him when he was about 6 years old. We were in the backyard of our old apartment. Before I had bought this house, I was pushing him on a cheap plastic swing. We were both laughing. I had forgotten that moment entirely until I saw the photo. I asked him where he found it. He said it had been in his closet for years. He said he had been looking at it a lot lately. trying to remember the person he used to be, the person I had raised him to be. I put the photo on my dresser, not in the living room where everyone could see it, not hidden away in a drawer, on my dresser where I would see it every morning and every night, a reminder, not of what was lost, of what was still being decided. By the fall, I had settled into a rhythm: work 3 days a week, volunteer 2 afternoons, church on Sundays with Ms. Eleanor, small routines that added up to a life. Not the life I had imagined, not the life where my son and I were close and I got to be a grandmother and everything knit back together neat and tidy, but a life that was mine, a life where I had agency and boundaries and peace. The mortgage was paid off, the house was secure. I had even managed to save a little money again, building back what I had spent on legal fees. Not much, but enough to feel less afraid when I thought about the future. Enough to know I could handle an emergency if one came. Enough to remember that I had survived worse than an empty bank account. Marcus got a new job. Nothing fancy. A step down from where he had been. But honest work with a company that had no connection to the Chens. He seemed lighter somehow. Less performative. Less like he was always trying to be someone he thought other people wanted him to be. He told me once that the divorce had been the worst thing and the best thing that ever happened to him. Worst because it hurt and cost him nearly everything. Best because it freed him from a life that was slowly crushing him into someone unrecognizable. I asked him if he had learned anything. He said he had learned that fear makes you do terrible things. Fear of disappointing people. Fear of not being enough. Fear of losing status or security or love. He said he had been so afraid of losing Rachel that he had sacrificed me, and in the end, he lost Rachel anyway and almost lost me too. He said he was trying to live differently now, trying to make choices based on what was right instead of what was safe. I told him that was all anyone could do. Try, fail sometimes, try again. I told him I was trying too, trying to be a mother who loved without martyring myself, trying to be someone who could forgive without forgetting, trying to leave room for people to change while protecting myself from who they used to be. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November when I got a call from Rachel. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice on the other end was different than I remembered, smaller, less certain. She said she knew she had no right to call me. She said she knew what she and her family had done was wrong. She said she had been in therapy for 6 months, and her therapist had suggested she might want to make amends to the people she had hurt. I was quiet. Part of me wanted to hang up. Part of me wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her, and her cold calculation, and her willingness to erase me for her own convenience. But another part of me was just tired of being angry. So I listened. She said she had been raised to think of relationships as transactions. Her parents had taught her that love was about strategy and leverage and getting what you needed before someone else took it from you. She said she had treated Marcus like an acquisition, treated his mother, me, like an obstacle to be managed. She said she was sorry. She said sorry didn't fix anything, and she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She just wanted me to know that she understood now what she had done. I asked her why she was really calling. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said because she didn't want to be the kind of person who could do what she did and never look back. She said she had destroyed her marriage and hurt people and lost herself in the process. She said she was trying to find her way to something better, something more honest. I told her I appreciated the call. I told her I accepted her apology for what it was worth, but I also told her that some things can't be fixed with words. Some betrayals leave scars that don't heal smooth. I told her I hoped she found whatever she was looking for, but she wouldn't find it through me. I had given enough of myself to her family. I had nothing left to offer her except this one conversation. She said she understood. She thanked me. She hung up. I sat with that call for a long time, turning it over in my mind, trying to figure out what I felt. I think what surprised me most was that I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant that she was suffering, or that she had lost Marcus. I just felt sad. Sad for all of us, for the ways we hurt each other, for the ways fear and greed and weakness turn us into people we never meant to be. Ms. Eleanor said that was growth. She said being able to see your enemies as human, as flawed and suffering and stumbling just like everyone else, that was the sign of someone who had made peace with their own story. She said I didn't have to like Rachel, didn't have to forgive her or want anything to do with her. But seeing her clearly, without hate clouding the picture, That was freedom. Winter came again, the anniversary of my accident, the anniversary of waking up to find my life stolen. I thought about marking it somehow, but I didn't know how, so I just lived through it. Went to work, made dinner, watched the news, went to bed in my own house that no one could take from me. Marcus came by that evening without calling first. I almost turned him away, but I saw something in his face. He said he had been thinking about this day, about how 1 year ago he thought I was dying and he made the worst decision of his life. He said he would regret it forever. Not just the action, the person he was who could make that choice. He said he wanted me to know that he thought about it every single day, that he was trying to earn his way back to being someone worthy of being my son. I made him tea. We sat in the kitchen. We didn't talk much, but the silence was different than it used to be. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of two people trying to figure out how to be in the same room after everything had broken and scattered and been swept up into something new. He asked me if I thought we would ever be okay again. I said I didn't know what okay meant anymore. I said we would probably never be what we were, but maybe we could be something else, something built on truth instead of obligation, on choice instead of habit, on respect instead of assumed forgiveness. He said he would take that. He said it was more than he deserved. I said maybe, but it was also what I needed. I needed to know that I mattered enough to fight for, that my boundaries would be respected, that love didn't mean erasure. He said he understood. He said he would spend the rest of his life proving he understood. Time would tell if that was true. But for the first time, I thought it might be possible. Not certain, not guaranteed, but possible. And possibility was enough to start with. The lemon tree produced 4 lemons that winter, 4 bright yellow fruits hanging on thin branches. I picked them carefully, like they were made of something more than just fruit and rind and sour juice, like they were proof of something, that patience pays off, that things grow even after trauma, that you can be broken and still bloom. I gave one to Ms. Eleanor, one to Sarah at the shelter, one I kept for myself, and one, after thinking about it for a long time, I gave to Marcus. He held it in his hands like it was fragile, like it mattered. He said thank you. I said it's just a lemon. He said no, it's not. It's a beginning. Maybe he was right. Maybe every hard thing we survive is a kind of seed. You plant it in pain and water it with tears and tend it through seasons of nothing but dirt and silence. And then one day, if you're patient, if you're stubborn, if you refuse to give up on the possibility of sweetness, something grows, something small and imperfect and entirely yours. I look at my life now and I see someone I didn't know I could be, someone who stood up, someone who fought, someone who decided she mattered more than the comfort of people who were willing to erase her. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just a woman who got tired of being small and decided to take up the space she had earned. The house is quiet most evenings, just me and the sounds of a life being lived, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old floors, the soft tick of the clock in the hallway. Sometimes Marcus visits. Sometimes I have Ms. Eleanor over for dinner. Sometimes I sit alone, and that's okay too, because alone isn't the same as erased. Alone is just another way of being whole. There are boxes in my closet I haven't opened yet, old letters from my husband, photos from when Marcus was small, memories I'm not quite ready to revisit. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday I'll be strong enough to look back without it hurting, or maybe I'll leave them closed. Some stories don't need to be retold. Some doors can stay shut. But the front door of this house, the one I fought for, the one I almost lost, the one I won back through courage I didn't know I had, that door stays open to possibility, to small reconciliations, to careful rebuilding, to the long, slow work of deciding what forgiveness looks like when you're doing it for yourself, not for the person who hurt you. I am 68 years old. I am a widow. I am a mother to a son who betrayed me and is trying to find his way back. I am a fighter. I am a survivor. I am a woman with a paid-off house and a lemon tree and a story that belongs entirely to me. And that, finally, is enough. If this story has touched your heart, subscribe now, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. That helps us keep sharing stories of strong women, families, and the unexpected turns of life.